And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. Trust you had quite a productive day, and most of you are home now and relaxing for your round of evening programs and to catch up on what has happened during the day. This evening, we're going to be hearing from you because I'll open up the phones at some point during the program so that we can hear from you. We start off today by remembering Brother Imran Khan, who died 2 days ago and was buried yesterday. He was of the Muslim faith, and as you know, Muslims usually bury their dead very quickly, unlike other religious um, uh, faiths. Um, the aspect of Imran Khan that I um, would like to reflect on is the fact of an Indian Guyanese being politically connected to a political party or a political coalition other than the PPP. There is the feeling, quite justified, that most East Indians, most Indian Guyanese will affiliate with the PPP. In fact, the PPP is quite vicious in Indian communities where there are Indians who associate with another party, particularly the PNC, because they're the arch enemies. And the community, PPP activists, tend to be very vicious against anyone from the community who associates with the PNC or no, the opposition. Some of it occurs in the African Guyanese community, but it's not as intense. I know of PPP members in Black communities for years since I was a child. Nobody bothered them at election time. Sometimes there are exchanges of words here and there. But people, I know in my community, I know of PPP families, not many, but Black people were associated with the PPP in the village, and you would hardly know because nobody bothers them. But in the Indian community, it tends to be a little bit different. PPP activists tend to be very, very vicious against Indians. You know, the whole term of Nimakaran, betraying the race, betraying the cause. It's very strong in the PPP psyche, and they give those people a hard time. And so it is in that regard that I would like to remember Imran Khan, who made the ultimate sacrifice. And that sacrifice was aligning himself first with the AFC. And when the AFC became part of the coalition with the APNU, that opened the Indian members, Nagamutu, Ramjatan, Imran Khan, are the ones who are most known. But there were other Indian Guyanese sisters and brothers who were part of the AFC, and the AFC entered into coalition with the APNU, which was dominated by the PNC. And so I know of the pressure that those brothers and sisters had to face in their communities. Imran was from the West Coast, well, East Bank of Essequibo, Virginusian. That's a community I did some work in a few years ago, so I'm somewhat familiar with the community. It's Virginusian and Zealot. They are adjoining communities. And when you take them together, they're mixed communities. And so that might have been some shelter for somebody like Imran Khan. But the fact of the matter is, an Indian who's associating politically with African organizations, African political parties, is really quite dangerous. And so I would like to remember Imran for making that ultimate sacrifice. And I know that there are pockets of Indian Guyanese who are opposed to the PPP for ideological reasons. And so they tend to align themselves with parties other than the PPP. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. And so I really would like to remember him. And I hardly knew him, as I have said on previous programs. I met him when he was a kid, little 20-year-old kid. He came up with a class at the University of Guyana, public communication class. And they were in Washington, D.C. to visit the OAS and other international organizations. Dr. Forsyth, who would be remembered as one of the pioneers of communication at the University of Guyana. And so he brought them up, and we put them up, and we arranged programs for them and all of that stuff. And Imran was there, and I interviewed, I was searching the archives for that program, but I couldn't find it. I was a moderator on a Caribbean TV program in Washington called Carib Nation. It's still there. And this is 1999, so it's 22 years ago or thereabout. And I remember interviewing Imran, and I remember being struck by his eloquence and clear thought at that time. And then he left and he went to Antigua, where he worked with the West Indies Cricket Board of Controllers, their public relations person. And from all indications, he did an excellent job there, but was always interested in politics. That's something I picked up when we met in Washington 22 years ago. And so he came home and, of course, got involved in politics. And as I said, you know, as an Indian getting involved in an anti-Indian party and an anti-PPP party, sorry, and an anti-PPP coalition was really a tremendous sacrifice. And I saw him over the years, from 2015 here and there. Never talked to him very much. A friend of mine asked me a favor, and I in turn asked him a favor. And so I went to his office there at NCN, and we chatted for a little while. And you know, he obliged and did the favor for me. I don't ask politicians favor for myself, but usually sometimes constituents ask you, and you have to talk to people. I sometimes do that, and in the case of Imran, I did that. And he didn't ask me any questions. He didn't think. He just thought it was the normal thing to do. And so on, I think it was Saturday morning or so, I was on Facebook and I saw him saying that he was battling and he would overcome. And I added my voice to the string of messages wishing him well. But, you know, as the Christians will say, the master had other plans. And our brother has gone 42 years or so. It's not a long time, on earth, but it's not the length of time that you spend here, but what you do with that life. And I think it's very important. Imran obviously dedicated his life to public service, first at the West Indies Cricket Board of Control, serving West Indies cricket, and coming back to his country and serving his country. Serving his country. I remember him when a young lady at NCN had become a candidate for the coalition through one of the political parties, through my own political party, the WPA. She was pushed around. She was threatened with losing her job. She was removed from announcing and put in the back room and all that kind of thing. And I remember Imran Khan standing up for her. And he was physically assaulted by somebody there, allegedly. I don't think the matter got very far. But he stood up for a young lady who was being threatened with losing her job because she put her name up as a candidate, a WPA candidate for the coalition. And as I said, Imran stood up for. So farewell, my brother. You know, it's always difficult when you lose people who you know, but public people, because when you live in the public, you die in the public, you know, and the public gets a chance to mourn and to remember you and to reflect on you. And we're always accused of reflecting on people after they die, which is one of the failings of the human society. But in this case, he was a young man. He was a young man. He had just started, young politically, you know, and so no one would have expected him to go so early. But the struggle goes on. The struggle goes on. Today you're up, tomorrow you're down. The challenges. Sometimes we think that we must always win. That every day there must be a political victory for our side. And sometimes we become so despondent when we don't get the victories. We become despondent when we don't see the fruits of our struggle and our sacrifice. And we have to understand that struggle is like life. Political struggle is like life. In life, things don't always happen overnight, even for people who are privileged. And so it is in political struggle, because political struggle is a struggle of human beings. Human beings are part of political struggle. Human beings are part of political struggle. And sometimes it looks as though we're not making any progress. And we look for all kinds of reasons why we are not making progress. But I can tell you, you know, someone who has been in the trenches for a long time, you know, we are making progress. Slow, sometimes it's not discernible. We are making progress. We are making progress in the struggle. And so our brother Imran did not die in vain. You know, Martin Carter in that poem, Death of a Comrade, said, "Death must not find us thinking that we die. Too soon, our banner drape for you. I would prefer a banner in the wind, not bound so tight in a scarlet fold, Not sudden with my people stairs, but flashing on the pole we bear aloft, down and beyond this dark lane of rags. If it must be, my brother, that we mourn no longer with you, we march no longer with you, that we sing no longer with you, that we speak no longer with you. Let me take a patience and a calm, for even now the sun explodes. Dear brother, we salute you, and we say, death will not find us thinking that we die. And that is our commitment. That has to be our commitment to a comrade who is gone. That death will not find us thinking that we die. What that means is that we have to join the struggle. We have to join the struggle. All of us have to pitch in. If I may make a criticism of our society, it is that sometimes we became victims of our own victories. Because ultimately, the objective of struggle is to be free. And freedom is a process. We struggle and we win. One looks back, one goes back. And if I may use myself as an example, my generation is a product. My generation is a product or are products of sacrifices made at a particular time. If you had come to my school in Buxton in the 60s and the 70s and said to me that one day you would be a university professor, or one day you would have a voice, a national voice, I would not have taken you seriously. Because at that time, a little boy and girl, showing some aptitude in school, your ambition was, to become a school teacher, work for the government. If you were lucky, you could have become a lawyer and a doctor, but not for people like me, poor people like me. I mean, the lawyers and the doctors came from the more privileged people in the society. But the rest of us, our ambition was within the context of where we were living. I see my friends, some of them on this program, people that I grew up with. I see a man named Renison David from Canada. He lives in Canada, Buxtonian. We all grew up together. And lots of other sisters and brothers I see on this program. And they can attest to what I was saying, But here we are. Here we are in 2021, doing more than we wished for 40 years ago. Had it not been for free and fair education, well, not free and fair, free education from university, from nursery to university, people like myself might not have gotten the kind of education that we were able to get. A lot of us went to university. I started at the University of Guyana in the 80s, when there was still free education at the University of Guyana. My mother had migrated, and so I migrated along with my siblings, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and I went to university at the University of the District of Columbia. And I remember in those days, $367 per semester. Part of my bachelor's was free in Guyana, and part of it was almost free in Washington, D.C., because Marion Barry, the African-American mayor, larger-than-life mayor of that city, had created that university for poor Black people in the Washington, D.C. area. And as an immigrant, I was able to benefit from that. And so we've made progress. Sometimes we think that we have not made tremendous progress. The progress is sometimes, a lot of times, not because of government, not because of the politicians, but in spite of them. In spite of them. You know, we're reaping the benefits of some forward-thinking policies in the immediate post-independence era. It was a tremendous era in Caribbean politics. Social reforms in Jamaica, democratic socialism under Michael Manley, social reforms in Guyana under cooperative socialism under Burnham, social reforms throughout the Caribbean in Barbados, the welfare state in Barbados. They didn't use socialism, but Errol Barrow set up what we know as the welfare state. And the irony is that the welfare state has survived the longest in Barbados. You know, free transportation, free education, and so on. And for a brief moment, the DLP government tried to, under the pressure from the international lending agencies, try to get rid of those social reforms, those welfare, people welfare, education, healthcare, transportation, public transportation. And the people promptly voted them out. 36-0, I think. That party that tried to dismantle the welfare state in Barbados got 0 seats. What it shows is that people may not say these things aloud, but people know when things are happening. And they know that when the society is retreating. And the welfare state is being dismantled in most, if not all, of the Caribbean, except Barbados. Except Barbados. And when you look at a place like Barbados and you ask why Barbados may have had an edge or two over the rest of the Caribbean, it has to do with the nature of that society. It is the only English-speaking Caribbean country that was a settler colony, which meant that white people settled there. White people didn't settle in the rest of the Anglophone Caribbean. They were absentee. A few of them came and stayed. But Barbados was the only place where they actually settled. In fact, lots of them were sent to Barbados when they were down and out. They chose to come to Barbados and live and try to find their fortune. And that is why today, about 10 to 15% of the Bajan population is white. They call them red legs, they're poor whites, because they were poor people who came from England. The Goddards and all those white people in Barbados, they're now the elites in Barbados, but they were poor white people. And that's why they call them red legs, reminiscent of the term that they use in America, where they call them rednecks. And that white community is still there. Because it was settler. And what the presence of white people during the period of slavery and colonialism meant is that the British had to provide more privileges in Barbados than in the other colonies. In fact, the whites in Barbados at one time seceded from the British. they did. Because they were arguing for privileges. They were not slaves. So what that meant is that education, for example, the British state, they had to make education available to the whites who were living there. And because they had to make education available to the whites, some blacks were able to benefit from that education. So blacks were able to benefit in Barbados from formal education earlier than other Anglophone Caribbean states because of the presence of the whites there. The second oldest parliament in the world is the Barbadian Parliament. The British Parliament is, of course, the oldest parliament, and then the Barbadian Parliament. They had a parliament there in Barbados from the 1700s. And that is why they call Barbados Little England, because of the presence of white people. And so there were some privileges that blacks in Barbados got, certainly the upper class blacks, or the less underprivileged blacks. And so therefore, this whole notion of Barbadian exceptionalism is nonsense. Barbados benefited from what you call front yard. The economists refer to it as a kind of front yard thing where they're located. They're the most easterly of the Caribbean islands, so they're not in the hurricane path. So they don't have to deal with things. And so Barbadian society, in a sense, developed a little bit different from the rest of us. And so the welfare state, because that's what they were. Democratic socialism was about the welfare state, and cooperative socialism or the welfare state. How do you use government in order to empower poor people? That is what Manley was doing, and Burnham was doing, and Verboord was doing, and Eric Gehry was doing, and Errol Barrow. That's what they were doing in the decades after independence. And so, persons like myself are beneficiaries of that experiment, as they call it today, those initiatives of social reform. In the English-speaking Caribbean, if you were born out of wedlock, you didn't have the same kind of rights in the society. You didn't have the same kind of legal rights as people who were born in a nuclear family. A mother and father were married. And, Burnham and Manley and those guys changed all of that in the 70s and the 80s. Be taken for granted. And we couldn't see the benefits right away. Like I said, sometimes you have to wait 30, 40 years. And then you see a whole generation of black and brown people in Guyana and the English-speaking Caribbean who are now in prominent positions. They are judges, they are lawyers, they are nurses, they are teachers, they are professors, they are engineers, they are environmentalists. It didn't come by accident. They are products of an investment made 40 years ago. And so sometimes we tend to want instant. We want to see instant successes. We feel that things come without struggle. No, things come through struggle. The epic conflict between those leaders that I talked about who were in government and the left wing, these young Patan boys and girls who had gone to the University of the West Indies, came out and they wanted revolutionary change in the Caribbean. I'm talking here about the Tim Hectors and the Geddes Granger and Walter Rodney and Clive Thomas and I and the rest who became part of the WPA. They were WPAs throughout the Caribbean. But Jamaica, they were the Workers' Party of Jamaica, the ACLM in Antigua, and you go through and through the Forum in Grenada, the NGM in Grenada, which actually had a revolution in '79. So you had this epic conflict between the fathers and their sons and daughters. And out of that conflict, people may say, well, why did the Rodneys and so challenge Burnham and why they did? And see, if you don't have challenge in a society, if you don't have what is called concourse of ideas, the society moves along a linear path. And so out of that epic struggle came, we didn't know it then, came the APNU. Because the APNU was really a product of two political parties that were in dire conflict in the 70s and the 80s, the PNC and the WPA. And while that conflict had negative consequences, there was assassination, there were all kinds of bad blood, and so on. But the positive out of it is that, you know, I think Clive Thomas, when they were forming the WPA, he said, the test of your political mettle is not how you can work with friends. It's how you can work with people who you don't share the same outlook with. That is your method. When you sit across the table, we joke about it, because people like Corbyn and Hammy they were seen as the men in the PNC who had a lot of spunks. And then there was us in the WP, and I'm sure they used to see us the same way. And then here we were sitting in the same room around the table together, talking about how to rescue Guyana from the. Our disagreements have not gone away. It still hasn't gone away. I suppose there is still some distrust on both sides. But the fact that we could have sat down and gave birth to a movement that would unseat the PPP, because it was felt that the PPP could not be unseated because of the built-in Indian majority. And so one had to strategize how to do it, and coalition building was the option. The brilliance of Corbyn and Rupnarayan and Thomas. I mean, Corbyn saw that if you went to the WPA, they're bringing, I don't like the term, but the people use it to the table, what they bring to the table. They're bringing it to the table people who are never going to come to us. They're bringing those radicals. And he was right. People do not necessarily identify that I belong to this party, but people identify with the outlook of parties. Outlook of parties. I go all over the place, and people will tell me, man, I is as a WPA man. They never become a member, but they're in step with the radical thinking of the WPA. So that's why it's sometimes difficult to figure which party got this support and all that, because when it comes to election, you vote for the party that you think is most likely to win. I remember this kid in 1997, on the night before election, we had a public meeting at Kitty Market Square. And this little girl, she was about 18 or 19 at the time. She came up to me. I had just finished speaking, and she said, Ms. Tynes, I saw on the TV that you all were having this meeting, and I would always see you on TV, and I wanted to see you in person and hear you in person. So I came out here to this meeting, and I like what I hear, and so on. So I turned to her and I said, thank you. And I said, well, you're going to vote for us tomorrow? She don't share, and she smiled. She said, Mr. Hines, they don't have any race named multi. Because in those days in WPA, we were talking about multiracial politics and so on. She said, they don't have a race named multi, and this thing is about race. She was 18, 19. And she said, I have to vote for the PNC because, they don't name multi, and they could win. And I remember the kind of wisdom, a kind of rationality and rationalization that hit me when that young girl at the time said that. And what it says to people like myself, And those of us who are not in a big mass party, is that you're not useless. Because I asked her, I said, well, man, you like what we're saying, why you can't give me the vote? She said, I like what you all saying, but Mr. Hines, I tell you again, they ain't get to raise them multi. Couldn't get her. But I walked away from that conversation with an understanding that all of us have a role to play in this struggle. We don't have to believe in the same thing. We don't have to belong to the same party, but we have a role to play in this struggle. And this is an enormous struggle that we're facing at present. A couple of weeks ago, people were on the streets. Today, they're not on the streets. The temptation is to quarrel with them and blame the leaders and so on. But that's struggle. They came onto the streets, and if you are thoughtful political people, you try to make the most of it. We have to learn the lessons from those few weeks when people were on the streets. I think it was Bobby Seale from the Black Panthers in the 60s who said you have to seize the time. And perhaps, we didn't seize as much, but we made a point. Those people made a point. They signaled to the government that it's not business as usual. And that's the big point. And as political people, that's what we have to draw from that. Not see it as a defeat that people are off the streets, but to see it as a lesson so that the next time around, we'll be able to make more of that. There are objective circumstances, which means that there are things beyond our control. And then there are subjective circumstances, which means things within our control. And every moment in the struggle, there are things within our control and there are things outside of our control. We live in a poor society. People are generally poor. We are in the moment of cost of living skyrocketing. The price of food in Guyana went up by 15.8%, 16% in the first 7 months of this year. That's a lot. When you think about the wages people make, and you think that they have to spend 17% more on food, that is 17% of their salary, or parts of, well, not 17%, but part of their salary that they would have that they could have spent on clothing. They now have to shift that to food, because food is important for sustenance. And so we are really at a very pivotal moment. And you see, political struggle is not just about political slogans and what we, the political leaders, think. It's about how we are able to merge what we think with people's circumstances. The narrative has to touch people in a place that make them act publicly. The old-time Marxists used to say, the objective conditions are not there for the revolution yet. It's not something that necessarily agree with, because I think sometimes you have to push. You can't wait on the objective circumstances to present themselves. You have to push it. You have to work it. But there's sometimes when you have to slow down and take a good look. So I think the last couple of weeks, we made our point. And we've prepared the wicket. You see, you go to a cricket match today and you think that the wicket was prepared this morning. No, the Bronx man has been putting work into that wicket sometimes for weeks to get it to where it is on match day. And so it's that work that we've got to put in. And we are in a different era. We're in the era of the mass media. The technology allows us to have programs like these. And we're able to communicate. In the old days, you know, you used to have to go to the street corner to hold public meetings. Now we are holding a public meeting here right now. We have the technology. And we are holding a public meeting and we are exploring ideas. We are making an assessment of where things are. And I'm going to open the phones in a couple of minutes so that I can get your perspective on where we are, you know? But let us not be deterred. What they say in the Bible, let not your heart be troubled. We are moving on. We are moving on, and the struggle goes on. Struggle goes on, and sometimes the victories come when you least expect them. Before I open the phones, I want to talk about something that bothers me. And that is the reports that are now all over Guyana that people are buying these books or these certificates on this COVID-19 test. And we have gotten some intelligence that the PPP are sending their agents into the Black community who are selling these things, and all people are buying them. And I think that's a development that we have to look at very seriously. You heard Mr. Anthony, the Minister of Health, saying people must report people who are engaged in unusual behavior. Interbenibo Mekwashi put that notice, because they have their agents out there and they're entrapping people. You're being entrapped and you're walking into the trap, and I want to appeal to our people to be very careful with that thing, because you're being entrapped and they're going to use it against you in the coming months. A few weeks ago, a month ago, you heard them arrest, I think, a couple of people of Redenup for having stolen COVID-19 certificates or something like that. And then you don't hear about it anymore. You don't hear about it anymore. So they have their people out there who are selling you those fake things. And in this day and age where a cell phone takes pictures even without you pointing it in somebody's face, you're being entrapped. I just want to appeal to our people to be very careful. I want to, those of you who are in the program here and you have family, tell them to act a little bit smarter. You know, the irony is that, you know, the PPP people are laughing. They're saying, look, they don't want to spend money for a test, but they're spending more money on a fake thing. And they're laughing over there, right? And so I just want to appeal to people to try and act smart. I saw in a PPP column today, they say the thing has become a cottage industry. And they say that is putting it mildly. And we live in a small society. It's very difficult for those things to happen without the authorities knowing. And Guyana is a place that's crawling. It's crawling with agents. The PPP is very good at that. They're very good of planting people in our midst, and who we may believe are friends or comrades, and usually these people are sweet talkers. The PPP is very good at that, extremely good at that. Years ago when they were in power, I remember going home after a couple of months and going to a place in my village there, a night spot. And you had these two beautiful young ladies approach me and started to chat. And within a minute, two village young ladies came and pulled me. Excuse me, Mr. Hines, we would like to have a word with you, and pull me away. And they pulled me away and said, those two girls are PPP agents. You know, the people in the village spot them, because one of the things in the village, you know when strangers are in your midst. Because the agents weren't from Buxton, but they were in a night spot where people from all over the country would come at nights in those days and hang out. And so I would not know, but I was in a village. And one thing I can say about villages, they know who are there from the village and who are not there from the village. And they don't play. They don't play with their community leaders and so on. They don't play with that at all. Right? So whenever the PPP is in office, they saturate the Black community with their agents, their phantoms. And you know, if you're 22, 23 today, you're 20 years old today, you would have been 14 years old in 2015 when the PPP left office, and you would not be knowledgeable of the PPP's operation, and so you tend to be a little bit more gullible. So I'm warning people out there, be careful with the entrapment. The PPP is very good at entrapping people. So there we are, you know, the struggle goes on. We have to continue to push for things. You know, we are dealing with a government that is not going to give in to the opposition. They're not. I think we can make that we can come to that conclusion. Now, it doesn't mean that they cannot be forced to, but they will not give in. I hear a lot of my colleagues said, well, you know, we should call on the government to this and the government should this. And that's good rhetoric. All opposition do that. All on the government to this people. And sometimes governments do give in to the opposition. Sometimes they appropriate things that the opposition struggle for. A few months ago, we had a debate on Camps TV morning program about whether the cash transfers should be given to students in the private schools. And I remember some of us arguing for it. I argued for it. And then quietly, 2 months later, the PPP does it. You see, we proposed it, and then we left it and move on to something else. And they come on, they teeth it like if it's their idea. That is why we have to get back into the culture of remembering. And we have to repeat things over and over so that we have intellectual and political ownership of those ideas. Because they will implement our ideas and don't give us credit. And because they implement it, our people will not see it as ours. So the struggle goes on. We have to struggle for change in an environment where the government is not giving in to anything. They're not a compromising government, meaning they're not a government that is given to compromise. We've been talking about a joint task force. No, the PPP has made it very clear. I don't know how many more people will have to die from COVID-19 before they even consider bringing in the opposition. But it's clear that they're not going down that road. I suggested to the formal opposition that they should have their own task force. They said no. Sometimes you have to live with those things because they're the parliamentarians. They belong to the big party. And they're not ideologically there yet where they can see that a task force from the opposition is able to do some things and to give their own supporters a sense of confidence. It doesn't have access to state power, but what it does is that it shows that the opposition is proactive. The opposition is on top of things. The opposition has its own expertise. That task force is going to be able to contradict some things that the PPP task force is doing, and so on and so forth. But our politicians didn't bite it, and it's there, And we are hoping that the government will come and be good and say, all right, let me bring you in. The PPP doesn't operate like that. The PPP has to be hauled screaming. In 1997, Desmond Hoyt, 1998, after the 97 election, Desmond Hoyt said slow fire. And they didn't take him seriously. He said more fire. And every day there were 7, 8, 9, 10,000 people on the streets in Georgetown. This went on for weeks and weeks. Aubrey Norton was the general secretary then. And he had a set of young men, and they were pulling Hoyt to the left. And Hoyt was out there because that's where the action was. And what happened? The PPP came to the table. They call in the 3 wise men from CARICOM. And they signed the Hurd-Munson Accord. The PPP had to give up 2 years from their 5 years. They had to agree to an arbitration committee for public service wages. Clive Thomas and Aubrey Armstrong, and I think Mr. Ganga from the PPP. They had to agree to constitutional change. And so the little changes we got in 2001 was as a result of the Hurd-Munson Accord. And when they weren't going along with the Hurd-Munson Accord, I called for more and more fire. And they had to go to St. Lucia and sign what is called the St. Lucia Accord. I'm recalling those histories. I'm recalling those histories to say to us that we are dealing with a government that is not going to hand you something without a struggle. So we have to move away from this rhetoric of calling on the PPP to do this and PPP to do that. And we have to lay ideas on the table and struggle for those ideas. And we have to build a movement that is going to bring them screaming to the table or get them out of the way via elections. We are coming up now onto a very crucial moment. GECOM is going to start advertising for a new CEO, a new deputy CEO, and other top officials at GECOM. It is no secret that both sides in a partisan commission wants control of GECOM. All that the PPP has done is to get control of GECOM. They got lucky. They got a chairperson who has gone along with them. So in a sense, they are 4 commissioners to the opposition 3. And now they want to take control of the machinery. They're going to rig the system. We argued in the WPA, they didn't bother carry that press statement, and Village Voice carried it, and then Vincent Alexander commented on it. And we said, look, the recruitment of workers at GECOM, the CEO and the deputy CEO, should not be done by the commissioners, because the commissioners are partisan commissioners. We should have an independent team interviewing and recruiting the CEO and the deputy CEO. The commissioners should not. The commissioners are political. The PPP said no. Why? Because they have 3 commissioners plus the chair, make it 4. And so when the candidates apply, it is these commissioners, these 7 commissioners, who will have to interview them and then make a decision who's the best one. And the PPP got 4 votes. 3 from them and 1 from the chairman. Unless the chairman changes her mind and thing, we don't know, but given everything that the chairman has done since last year, she has gone along with the PPP commissioners. And so the employment of the CEO, deputy CEO, and top officials at GECOM is now going to become a top issue. We said to them, we said, no, let an independent team recruit the people and interview them. Don't let the political committee. The PPP said no. Control of the commission gives you control over who becomes this part of the secretariat. And who becomes part of the secretariat has a lot to do with what happens during the election. Even with Lowenfield, who was not a PPP-leaning person, the PPP was able to manipulate what happened on election day, the 48 boxes, the people who vote on the ground, and so on. Even without a PPP CEO and deputy CEO, they were able to manipulate that election. Now with a CEO and a deputy CEO and returning officers, pro-PPP, you can imagine what they will do. The struggle goes on. this struggle goes on, my people. It's no time to sit idle. No time to get pinned down with any one issue. The struggle goes on. Tell you what, I'm going to take a short break now. And when we come back, we're going to open the phones. We have about half an hour. And I'm going to get your take on what's happening. I notice you all are busy in the chat room. And that's okay. Next week, we are going to try to get Professor Thomas here to talk about that 16,000% rise in food and the cost of living. We're going to try to get economists, Professor Thomas and Winston Jordan, to come here and to talk us through the implications of that. So we're going to deal with that. We have that town hall meeting that Aubrey Norton has promised to do. We're going to try to get him here within a week, at most 2 weeks, to come on. You all are going to get a chance to come into the chat room and ask him questions directly. You know, when he comes on, I get to ask him questions. But he must face. A lot of you are saying he's the man to take over the leadership of the PNC, but he must not get a free pass. He must answer questions. And so he has agreed to come on to that town hall style meeting. And like I said, we're going to do that within the next 2 weeks, not later than that. And we're going to make arrangements for those of you who want to come into the chat room in order to get to ask Aubrey Norton questions. So take a short break, and then when we come back, we'll open the phones. I don't think the operator is quite ready for me yet. As I was saying, you know, the struggle goes on. You know, we've got to keep on anticipate. We've got to anticipate. We must not always react to things. So we have to begin to talk about what's happening or what's going to happen at GCOM now. We don't wait until it happens and then talk about it. We got to be talking about it now. Okay, I think the operator is ready for me now. We'll take a short break, and then we come back, we open the phones. Welcome back here to Politics 101. I think the operator signaled to me that there's some technical difficulties with the internet where he is. And while they're sorting that out, let's continue to talk. Those of you in the United States of America and follow the politics there, you know, the Senate and the House, they're talking about the Biden agenda there, and you see the struggle there between the progressives and the moderates in the Democratic Party. Here is a party that won by the skin of his teeth, and now it's time to put in place the agenda. And you have two senators who are holding the entire program to ransom. How can that be democratic? How can that be democratic? You know, you have 50 senators on the Democratic side, and 2 of them are holding the other 48 to ransom. And that's the kind of democracy that needs changing. That's the kind of democracy that needs changing. You can't say that that is democratic. And it's dishonesty, because Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema were elected as Democrats, but they're acting like Republicans. No, I am an independent person, and I always like independence. You don't always have to toe the party line. I think that that's craziness. You don't have to toe the party line always. But on something that is fundamental as this, you have to find a way to come to some reasonable compromise. I mean, Manchin said that the $1.5 trillion, which is a far cry from $3.5 trillion. That's not a compromise. That's not a compromise. We remember in our own country, where one parliamentarian, Sharon Das, was able to bring down an entire government. You see, democracy is not always democratic. One man out of 33 was able to bring a government down. And we hear all kinds of arguments, some of them very reasonable. You know, he was elected as a coalition member and he voted with the PPP. The rules allow him to. We have to think about those rules. We have to think about those rules. We have to think about those rules. And we have to change those rules. Like I said, I believe in political independence. I don't believe people should be herded like animals and beaten to toe the line. But you cannot have a situation where a government can be brought down by one member in an environment in which the opposing party uses money to buy its way. It doesn't use arguments, it uses money. It means, therefore, that you're always vulnerable to bribes. You're always vulnerable to bribes. So we have to look at the very nature of democracy in a place like Guyana. We have to look at the very nature. Why a party or coalition with 31 seats has no say whatsoever in what happens in the country? In a formal way. Something is radically wrong there. And we have to change our system. Some people are going to say, no, wait, let's go into government and we will then be in the majority. Look, you win elections and you lose elections. And any party that thinks that it can go on to win elections forever and forever is stupid. It's stupid. It's stupid. You have to create a system where whether you win or you lose, you are able to participate in government. You're able to participate in government. Otto Lewis says, substantive democracy is about all those who are affected by a decision should be at the table to make those decisions. You see? And so that's something that we have to put on the table again, the nature of the democracy. Fools run around the place talking about rigged elections. They rigged elections inside the PPP. In 1961, Fidel Che Juman. Let me give you some history. In 1961, there was a contest between Brindley Ben and Balram Singh Rai for the chairmanship of the PPP. Dr. Jagan was out of the country. And Balram Singh Rai won the election. Jagan wanted a black man as the chairman. And when Jagan come back, he overturned the election and awarded the chairmanship to Brindley Ben. Sidney King at that time wrote an article called The Rot in the PPP. The PPP are artful riggers. They rig anything in sight. They've been able to do it without getting the label. So jackasses run around using the term free and fair election and rigged election. The PPP invented rigged elections in Guyana. And when they talk about the PNC rigging election, the very Americans were instrumental in the rigging of those elections under the PNC because it suited their purpose then. You sometimes laugh when you hear the international community talking about rigged elections and free, fair elections, and you know that in the 60s they encouraged it. And they're encouraging it again. And you have these fools running around you talking about rigged elections. And they know not what they talk. The PPP are better riggers than any other party in the Caribbean. They rigged the voters list. If the coalition were riggers, they would have known that they needed to rig the voters list. The coalition can rig with PPP. They're going to rig the GCOM personnel if they're not stopping in the coming weeks. Let me talk to you all about rigging. These people are allowed to get away with these words because people don't challenge them. People don't challenge them. But the PPP are the master riggers in Guyana. They've studied rigging. They use money. They use everything at their disposal. to rig. And so when these fools come and be talking about rigging 2020 elections, 2020 elections were rigged long. They rigged on the voters list. You had a voters list of 600, 500 and 600 something thousand on a list of 700 and something thousand. What can be more rigging than that? You all need to stop. You all need to stop. Rigging is embedded in everything the PPP does. They rig the treasury. This last budget, they hide money under headings. We're asking, where the money for this at? And they hide it somewhere so they can go and thief it tomorrow. And you all come on programs like these and try to make our people think that they're thieves. Let me tell you all something about the PPP. They rig their own ideology, fool us for years that they're Marxist-Leninists. The only Marxist-Leninist party in the world that does not mobilize based on class, but mobilize based on race. You're rigging your own ideology that Roy and them and Ramatarata said the other day, you're no longer Marxist-Leninist. What I mean is that the mask of Marxist-Leninism came off. Money and race. Money and race. That's the PPP's ideology. Never Marxism, Leninism, that was always a mask. So while I agree with my brothers, Donald and Clement, and you know, I can call them brothers. We've been in the struggle long and so on. We have great disagreements, but those are two members, and there are others in the PPP who I think there is a touch of, more than a touch of humanity there. Gail Teixeira is the only old school person with this gang. They shack out all the old timers. Gail is the only old timer there with them. So even the PPP members cannot stand the thieving. Old people say a liar is a scoundrel. And we can add to that, a scoundrel is a murderer. That's why they've got to murder people to survive. Because when you set up a murderous, when you set up a dictatorship, when you have the criminalization of the state, you have to become criminals yourself to defend your criminal kingdom. So don't come here and tell people about supporting rig elections and all of that. If I was supporting rig election, I'd be supporting the people, because they're the ones who rig the 2020 elections. And I ain't supporting them. So I supporting rigging. These are the things that these people get away with, and they're able to pull wool over people's eyes. But we're making sure that they don't do that. We are making sure that they don't do that. I've got word from the operator that he's having some technical problems, and so we're not able to take calls today, unfortunately. Unfortunately, because I would have loved to hear from you today. But let nobody tell you that you all are natural thieves. You all are not. I'm not denying that the PNC in its past was not involved in electoral malpractice. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. I'll be a fool to deny that. But I'm saying don't make it look as though the other ones are somewhere or the other paragons of virtue. They just never get catch as they get caught in 2020. In 2020, they got caught. I was that day at Mon Repose. I was there in Mon Repos that day. I was dropping some elections agent there. And when I got there, I saw the commotion. Basil and Amna were there. And Anil Nandalal saw me. And the two boys that the girls catch, who come back and voting for other people with fake thing, they were there with Nandalal. Nandalal saw me. He said, David, you's a reasonable man. Come, man. The guys who were with me were reluctant for me to come out, but I came out and I think Anil tell me the story and so on. He didn't deny that the boys, they go with fake ID. He said, David, man, there's an easy thing, man, we can walk out. That is why I tell Amna and Basil, we can walk this thing out, man. The parties can walk it out. He did not deny Anil that the boys that they vote 2 or 3 times they were going back and they were caught. I later spoke with the young ladies who caught them. You're talking about thief in elections. I went to Strathspey School that same day. They were in a white minibus sharing out ID cards. Our runners called the base and tell us what was happening. And they sent me to see. Probably was a mistake because as soon as they see me, they recognize me. They pull in the door of the minibus and drive away, quick time. We couldn't even get a number. But as I was entering the polling station, an old Indian woman said to me, Sir, I'm behind there. The school got at about 3 or 4 polling stations. And they were carrying the fake ID at the station behind. An Indian woman is the one who directed me at the back there. You talking about rigging? I saw it on election day. I saw it on election day. 2 young people, a young woman and a young man, they were 18 and 19. They came to the coalition office and said they went to where they're supposed to vote and the name not there. When we run the thing, they got these 2 young people voting till at the back of Enterprise. But these 2 young people were determined that they had to vote. They kept pushing around. Nobody don't want to go to the back of Enterprise. I take one of my buys them, and I tell the young people come in my car, and I drive them to the back of Enterprise. When I get there, I realize why nobody want to go there. Till down at the back. When I go there, they get a little makeshift shack. That is the polling station. When we went into that place, they jump. They don't expect nobody from the thing. Well, of course, again, the mistake is that I'm a recognizable person. They jump. And they're fiddling. Nobody in this polling station. This is about 1, 2 o'clock in the middle of the day. In a little shack, in a field. At Enterprise, at the back of Enterprise. Now they put some of our people to vote, they're knowing that no sensible black person going at the back of Enterprise to vote on election day. But I went there to take those 2 young people and they said to me, Mr. This is the first time we voted and we really want to vote. I drive them and go there with me and one of my friend them. Me send in my friend with them. And then I step out and peep in. They're in there. They're in there, pop stuff in the boxes and all that stuff. One Peter skin when they see me. You telling me about rigging? You telling me about rigging? I can say without fear of contradiction that I worked on election day on the East Coast from our base in Buxton, but I was perusing the East Coast. There was no instruction that came down from the high command of the coalition to rig an election. That is why you couldn't go in to boxes and in PNC stronghold or coalition stronghold and see what you saw in those 48 boxes. There was an instance in a polling station in Buxton where somebody went in to vote for their auntie. And apparently they didn't have the right documents. Either they forget the proxy thing or whatever it is. And that black worker in Buxton said, no, you can't vote. And, you know, people get excited and they say, oh, this girl, she want people to vote. And they said and called me. I went down at the back. I knew before I got there what was happening. And I went down at the back there and I spoke to the persons in the polling station. They were all black. The only person there was an Indian polling agent. And they explained to me, they said she didn't have the right documents and they couldn't. I'm telling you, this happened in Buxton. Our people played by the rules. Nobody had to tell me that I was there. I had to cool down the Buxtonians and tell them, let the person do her work. She said the person got the right documents. Leave it. Our people played by the rules in those elections. And they got the audacity, as people say in the village, the audacity to come here and tell people rigging election. Nobody had to tell me I was there on election day, up and down. And whenever there was a crisis situation, I was the person who was sent to deal with it. I've not said much on my experience during those days and the run-up. Those people planted. They paid little boys and girls in the villages to go and volunteer to be polling agents for the coalition. And we were able to detect some, if not all of them in Buxton. Again, you know, people trust you in the village, they pull you aside. Little girl, come and tell me, my grandmother said she wants to see you. I went to see the grandmother. Grandmother said, me get one grand picnic. The PPP give you money for come and volunteer. I would take your name off. And so we were alerted. That is rigging. We were alerted, hopefully. And so we were able to go through the list and we found the phantoms on the list. The other day when I was home there, I saw one of the phantoms and I was telling him, you know, that what he allowed himself to get into was disgraceful. And, you know, he was telling me, man, Dr. Heinzman, you know, people suffering and I needed the money at the time, but I apologize. I know I did something wrong. That's the rigging. That's how you rig elections. And I can tell you, when we were asking the high command in the coalition for money to do legitimate things, we had to beg hard to get money. We weren't even spending money on legitimate thing, much more to spend money on illegitimate thing, while the PPP was spending money rigging the elections. That's how you rig elections. And these fools are coming here and telling people about rigging elections. They rigged that elections through and through. Rig those elections. I saw with my own face, with my own eyes. I saw with my own eyes what went on that day. And if for a person like me who always knew these things, it was a shock to me. First of all, the extent to which they would go, but the second in which how organized they were and how bold they were. How bold they were. How bold were, and they did not deny that the boys were caught voting 2 and 3 times. You see what happened? A lot of these, our brothers and sisters in the Indian community, they get one name. It's not like Ingrid King. Dindyal is one name. And in one village, you may have 5, 6 Dindyals. It's easy to vote multiple. And what I learned by talking to an Indian Guyanese brethren who was an old WPA member, he told me when people left in for come away to America and Canada, they leave the ID card with the PPP man in the village. So the PPP was able to accumulate thousands of ID cards. And if Dindyal gone to Canada, they find a Dindyal in the village, Dindyal go he vote in one station for himself, and then he go and vote in the next station for the next Dindyal. But sometimes they have 2, 3 stations in one flat of a school, and if your agent is alert enough, he or she will know this by vote, and we do go and vote over there. And so they get catch wherever they were caught. So there was no denial. I saw that thing with my own eyes. And as I said, our agents, for the most part, did not encourage any, even a hint of skullduggery. It's not like the girl was going, she didn't have the document. Wherever proxy document is supposed to get, she go and she trying to vote for she auntie without it. And the girl then box and said, no, you can't do that. And of course, people get vexed and say, oh, this girl walking, so she denying people the right to vote. And they sent and called me. I had to go down there. When I walk in, they explained to me, I knew what was happening. And I asked the young lady, I said, go get the right papers and come back and vote for your auntie. But you can't, because his villagers think you can come without the document. So our people acted according to the rules. That is why we can have all those abnormalities that we found in the boxes during the recount. And the PPP can point to abnormalities in boxes in our strongholds, because there was none. There was none. I went to a police station at Bladen Hall. I saw an Indian policeman with ballot papers in his hand. You all can get me in a mood tonight. Indian policeman, I went to Bladen Hall and said, what you doing with this? And the officer in charge came over and said, boy, you're not supposed to get this thing. He said, some agent give you it for all. I said to the man, you know, you should have this boy here really removed from here. He said, Dr. Hines, I'm embarrassed. He should not have had those things in his hand. Kabbalah Pepinian. And he directing people. You gotta go in the line. It's an Indian policeman. You gotta go in the line. You gotta go in the line. And again, it's people who see. And I was in the compound, came out and said, Dr. Hines, so, go in there right away. The advantage of sending a person like me, the disadvantage is that they will recognize me. That's a disadvantage. The advantage is they're not going to push me around, or anybody else had gone, they might want to, you know, cost them and so on. The advantage is that they couldn't do that. So in many cases, they admit to me what they were doing was wrong. So don't let nobody tell you about rigged elections. The real riggers of the elections were the PPP. And that is why to this day, I have not come out and talk about anybody rigging any election at GCOM with Mingo and this body. I've desisted from that because I saw what happened on the ground on that day. So there we are, my sisters and brothers. The struggle goes on. We've got to fight back. We've got to find creative ways of fighting. And we can't give up. The struggle goes up and the struggle goes down. And we have to keep on fighting. So, here we are. I hope you have a productive weekend. You volunteered to do something. We volunteered to do something. Do something in your community. Do something in your church. Do something in your group. Secondly, keep yourself safe. Keep yourself safe. This COVID thing is getting out of hand. Keep yourself safe. Encourage other people to do what is right. Those of you who are anti-vaccine, you also have a responsibility to be. In fact, you were anti-vaccine. You have a greater responsibility to ensure that people are safe, because you're eliminating one form of fighting COVID, which means that the responsibility is on you now to maximize the other forms. You have a greater responsibility. Third, I want to beg you all, stop this conspiracy theory. Every time something happens, we say, well, it's this. There's a way in which we have to criticize the politics of COVID and try to desist from criticizing the science of COVID. Because when we criticize the science of COVID, even if our criticism is valid, it's being misinterpreted by our people. So let us separate the politics from the science, right? We can continue to abuse of the politics, but we have to be very careful that we tone down these conspiracy theories. The fact of the matter is that our people are dying. I see a 17-year-old boy die today. I have close friends, very close friends in the last couple of weeks who have come down with this thing. It's coming close. We have a responsibility. So you all tone down these conspiracy theories and take that energy to help to save us, to save our lives. There are too many funerals, too many RIPs and SIPs, too many of it. Calm down. these conspiracy theories. You're anti-vaccine, you're anti-vaccine. Maximize the other forms of prevention. I'm not about to argue with anybody who's anti-vaccine, right? All I'm saying is maximize. Become soldiers for saving lives, even though you're anti-vaccine. Your argument is that vaccine is not the only way of saving lives. Well, maximize the other ways of saving lives. Too much of this thing about this body died after they take the vaccine, and this body died after. Next thing we're going to hear people dying because they're wearing masks. And next thing we're going to hear people die because they're 3 feet apart. We got to get off of that nonsense. Somebody dying because of the vaccine doesn't mean that the vaccine has not saved others. You know, we're smarter than that, right? We are more intelligent than that to be getting into these kinds of things. It's almost as if we're warring among ourselves on COVID, and it shouldn't happen. We have different views on vaccine. Don't war among ourselves. Those who are pro-vaccine should try to see the logic and the reasoning of those who are anti-vaccine. Those who are anti-vaccine also should try to see the logic of those who are pro-vaccine. This, you know, we have some of it on our programs, and you know, try and tone it down, man. It's not looking good. We're spending too much of energy on this anti-vaccine when we should spend that energy on trying to see how all of us can push this thing out the door. And those of you who are buying the books, you all be careful. Be careful how you all buying those books. There are health implications because you buy the books and you know gone into an environment that is a spreader. And you know that you haven't tested. And you are going in there with these fake things in a spreader. So you're fooling them that you're vaccinated, but you end up fooling yourself because you're in these spreader thing and so on and killing up yourself, man. We're too intelligent. We're too intelligent. You all stop it now. Stop it now. Stop it now. Too many lives. Too many lives. Too many public people. Many of our leaders. All right? So I'm begging. I've never asked people to take the vaccine. I have taken the vaccine. I'm about to take my booster. I can't wait to take it. But that's my view. For those of you who are genuinely concerned, if my voice means anything, I am recommending to you, think very seriously of being vaccinated. It's another layer, you know, you wear your mask, your social distance, you avoid large crowd, your vaccine, all is better than none. 3 are better than 2, right? So let's tone down the acrimony and let's try to figure out, all of us, how we can save our people and save our society and save our country. Thank you, good night, and have a wonderful weekend. We can see you all again here next Monday. Bye-bye.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.